Hi, my friends. Welcome to English Story School. What would you do if you knew tonight could be your last night alive? Would you cry? Would you regret? Or would you fight one final time to leave a mark the world can never erase? Tonight's story is not about dying. It's about the moment when a man used his last breath to win the greatest victory of his life. Part 1. The countdown begins. He was lying on that hospital bed, the beeping of the heart monitor ticking away like a clock counting down to 0. Every second felt heavier than the last. Doctors whispered. Friends avoided eye contact. But his eyes burned like fire. "I'm not here to watch the clock," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am here to finish my mission." That night, he made a promise to himself. If this is my last breath, it will be my loudest. It's not how many years you live. It's how much life you put into your years. The room smelled like antiseptic and leftover fear. A storm pushed rain against the window in short, angry bursts. In the fluorescent half-light, tubes coiled from his arm like clear vines, drip, 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 each drop a small reminder. You're not done yet. He shifted his shoulders, winced, and then settled. Pain was there, sharp, honest, like a coach who refuses to lie. He listened to the monitor's rhythm until it matched the stubborn beat inside his chest. "Count with me," he told himself. "Not down, up." A nurse named Maya adjusted the oxygen line. She was gentle but efficient, the kind of person who could lift you with her eyes. "You need rest," she said. "I need purpose," he answered. His tone wasn't rude, it was final. The kind of final that stands up straight, even when your body won't. She paused, studied the defiance on his face, and exhaled. "You're not supposed to be this alert," she said softly. "I'm not supposed to be average either." He looked at the wall clock, 11:19 p.m. His second hand hopped forward like a tiny soldier taking ground. He imagined the minutes weren't leaving him. They were reporting for duty. One more minute, one more chance to push back. He reached for the small notebook on the tray, the one he'd asked Maya to find in his bag. Its cover was scuffed, the edges softened by years of being carried in fights he couldn't afford to lose. On the first page, he wrote in big block letters. Mission 1. Leave nothing unsaid. 2. Leave nothing undone. 3. Leave no one behind. He underlined the third line 3 times. The pen shook in his hand, but the letters came out steady, almost proud. "Clarity is oxygen," he muttered, and he felt the air move easier through his chest. A resident pushed in with a cart, eyes on the tablet, and gave a clinical smile that didn't move the rest of his face. Numbers, charts, probabilities. The resident spoke in measured sentences, careful not to ignite hope. It was the language of medicine, precise and safe, but it felt like a lot of maybe nots. "Be direct," he said. "What am I up against?" The resident swallowed. "Your heart function is compromised. Infection made it worse. We're stabilizing you, but you need to be prepared." "For what?" "For the possibility that your body won't turn the corner." He nodded once, slowly. The information didn't crush him. It clarified him. "Thank you," he said. "Now give me my odds for today." "Today?" "Yes. The odds I can sit up. The odds I can breathe without the mask for 5 minutes. The odds I can write 10 more lines in this notebook." The resident blinked. "Those odds are good. Then let's start there." When they left, Maya remained. She pulled the chair close, sat at eye level. "What is this mission you keep talking about?" she asked. He looked toward the rain. "There's a boy who thinks quitting is hereditary. There's a woman who thinks I forgot how to fight. And there's a younger version of me, the one who took punches and kept smiling, who's standing at the edge of this bed asking, 'Do we still mean it?' My mission is to answer him." Maya's mouth curved into a sad smile. "What will you say?" He took a breath that felt like lifting weight with broken ribs. "I'll say yes. We still mean it." The PA system crackled in the hallway. Distant footsteps, cartwheels, a cough. Life buzzed around his island of white sheets and steel rails. He closed his eyes and saw a gym with cracked mirrors, heavy bags taped to the seams, chalk dust floating like tired snow. A man with salt and pepper stubble, his old coach, stood with his arms crossed and his eyes on fire. "Breathe through the ache, kid. Don't fight the pain. Work with it." He could hear the echo of the coach's laugh, the way it always broke the tension before a hard round. When fear speaks, his coach used to say, "Answer with action." He opened his eyes. Action. He pressed the bed control and raised the headrest. Every inch higher was a skirmish, everyone a spark. The monitors complained for a second, then calmed as his breathing found a rough rhythm. He reached again for the notebook. Next page. New words. Rules for survival. Do not bargain with excuses. Do not worship outcomes. Do not surrender your voice. He wrote a line underneath, a quote to anchor himself. Courage isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to move anyway. He rested, then pointed toward the window. "Can you open it a little?" he asked Maya. "I want to hear the storm." "It's cold," she warned. "Good," he said. "Let it sting. I want to feel the world arguing with me." She cracked the window. The rain hissed. The city hummed. Ambulances far away. An engine. The low thunder arguing with the night. He closed his eyes and let the sounds braid with memory. The taste of iron after a split lip, the smell of rope and resin, the shock of early morning air during road work when your lungs beg and you answer, "Not yet." He squeezed his fist and felt the foretape bite his skin. "Pain is the price of arrival," he whispered. "And I'm arriving." Maya checked his vitals. "You're pushing yourself hard," she said. "I'm pushing myself honestly." She stared at him like she'd just met a different species. "You talk like a fighter." "I am," he said. "Everyone is. Most people just don't declare it." A silence built, not the heavy kind, the kind that agrees. After a moment, Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a black Sharpie. "You wrote your mission," she said, pointing to the notebook. "But I think you should see it." She clicked the marker and, with a quick glance at the door, wrote on the glossy edge of the heart monitor's plastic casing, big enough to catch his eye every time it beeped. "Finish your mission." He laughed, then coughed, then laughed again. "I like you," he said. "Good," she replied, "because I'm on your side." She capped the marker. "And one more thing, hydrate. Heroes still need water." He sipped. The water tasted like resolve. At 12:03 a.m., the storm eased. The room felt wider, like it had exhaled with him. He took off the oxygen mask for 30 seconds, 40, 50, until the monitor scolded him back into compliance. It wasn't recklessness. It was proof. He needed evidence that this body still answered his voice. He imagined the people who loved him, the boy, the woman, the coach who lived in his memory, and he pictured a scoreboard only he could see. Faith, 1. Fear, hero. Then he thought about the world outside. Strangers who would never know his name, but might need his last ounce of courage. A spark doesn't ask if it's enough, he wrote. It just starts the fire. He rested. He let the quiet stretch, not as surrender, but as strategy. He knew the next hours would be negotiations between ambition and biology. He planned them like rounds in a fight. Breathe, right, think, rest. Breathe, right, think, rest. No wasted motion. No wasted words. The mission wasn't heroic speeches. It was ordered steps. The door slid halfway open and a shadow leaned in. His friend stood there, hands buried in his jacket, eyes rimmed in red. For a second, guilt flickered. Had he made it harder for them by refusing to soften the truth? He waved his friend closer. "Don't apologize," he said before the friend could speak. "I'm not dying. I'm deciding." "Deciding what?" the friend asked. "To be bigger than this bed." His friend tried to smile and failed. "You're impossible," he said. "Impossible is the right size," he replied. He held out the notebook. "Read the first page." His friend read, then swallowed. "No one writes like that in here," he said. "They will," he answered. "Because we did." The friend nodded, left. The room reclaimed its hush. He looked again at the sharp letters on the monitor. "Finish your mission." The letters weren't pretty. They were loud. He liked that. Pretty was for postcards. Loud was for life. He pulled the blanket higher, felt the weight across his legs, and let the heaviness remind him he still occupied space. He pressed his palm to his sternum and felt the thud beneath. Not a perfect drum, but still a drum. "You and me," he said to that stubborn beat. "We're not done." On the next page, he wrote one more line. A promise to himself, a dare to the universe. "If the clock wants a countdown, I'll give it a show." Then he set the pen down, closed his eyes, and rehearsed the sound of victory, quiet at first, then growing, beat by beat, breath by breath, until the night itself seemed to lean closer and listen. Part 2. The battle he chose. Flashback to a year earlier. He was in the fight of his life. Not against an opponent in a ring, not in front of a roaring crowd, but against a disease that wanted to break him from the inside. It was silent, invisible, merciless. The kind of enemy you couldn't see coming with a fist, but felt clawing through your bones at 3 a.m. The pain was unbearable, the kind that made you scream without sound. But he laughed. Yes, laughed. Because deep down, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Pain can't break a man who refuses to bend. His days began with fire in his joints and ended with a storm in his chest. Some mornings, he could barely lift a spoon. Some nights, even air felt heavy to breathe. Yet every sunrise, he dragged himself out of bed, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "You're still here. And if you're here, you're not finished." Friends crowded his small apartment back then, watching him deteriorate with worried eyes. They brought soup, medicine, soft words, every kindness they could think of. They begged him to rest, to stay down, to accept the sentence written in his blood work. "You need to save your strength," they pleaded. But he refused. "Save my strength? No, I need to spend it." You don't win wars by sleeping through the battle. His voice, though hoarse, carried the weight of steel. And when they tried to reason with him, he just laughed harder. Not out of denial, but out of defiance. Out of the joy of refusing to be owned by what tried to control him. "Pain," he once said, "isn't the enemy. It's the price of progress." He kept moving. He worked out in bursts. even if that meant only lifting his arms against gravity until sweat soaked his shirt. He forced his legs to walk across the room, to feel the floor under his feet, to remember that he wasn't just a patient, he was a fighter. Every step was a punch landed against the invisible monster inside him. Sometimes in the darkest hours, the disease whispered temptations. Rest. Give in. Let be easier. But he answered with grit. He would slam his fist against his chest and shout, "Not today." His neighbors thought he was losing his mind. The truth? He was finding it. He wrote messages on sticky notes and plastered them across his walls. Breathe like a warrior. No retreat. No surrender. If it hurts, it means I'm alive. One day, a close friend named Ryan came by and found him in the middle of the floor, drenched in sweat, trying to hold a push-up position with trembling arms. Ryan panicked, rushing to help. "Stop! You'll kill yourself." Ryan shouted. He collapsed to the ground, rolled over, and started laughing again. His chest rose and fell with raw fire. "Ryan," he said, "don't you get it? I'm already fighting for my life. What's the point of saving myself for later if later might not come? I'm cashing in every ounce of willpower I've got right now." Ryan didn't understand at first. Few did. But slowly, those who came to visit began to see what was happening. His laughter wasn't madness. His stubbornness wasn't recklessness. It was his rebellion against the disease. He wasn't ignoring reality. He was rewriting it. And every small act, every half push-up, every trembling step, every shouted, "Not today," was a victory. The doctors measured his decline with charts. He measured his progress with scars, sweat, and grit. There were nights he lay in bed, teeth grinding against the agony. Tears carved paths down his temples, soaking the pillow. But even then, he whispered to himself, "If pain can talk, then so can I. And my voice will be louder." He remembered the words of a book he once read. A hero is not the one who feels no fear, but the one who walks forward in spite of it. And he held that like a torch in the darkness. The battle was relentless. Hospital visits, needles, medications that tasted like poison. Every treatment drained him, yet he walked out of each session with his chin high, fists clenched, daring the disease to swing harder. One morning, his sister visited. She found him standing by the window, arms stretched out as if embracing the sunrise, his face pale, but glowing with something untouchable. "You look like a ghost," she whispered, tears choking her. He turned to her, eyes sharp as glass. "Then let this ghost haunt every fear that tried to bury me." She cried, but he smiled. That was his pattern, her tears his fire. As the months crawled forward, his body weakened. Yes, but his will? It hardened like iron under flame. He journaled every day, writing not about death, but about life. His entries weren't despair, they were declarations. If today is all I have, I'll use it like a sword. If tomorrow comes, it better be ready for me. I will not fade quietly. I will roar. Neighbors began to notice. People who once whispered about his condition started knocking on his door just to hear a few words from him. He became their unofficial preacher of resilience. They came broken, scared, defeated. They left standing taller, carrying pieces of his fire with them. "You're contagious," one woman told him after he spent an hour talking her out of giving up on her own illness. He grinned. "Good. I'd rather spread courage than disease." By the end of that year, the doctors admitted they were puzzled. His numbers should have fallen lower. His condition should have crushed him. But something about his stubborn spirit kept pushing him past the expected deadlines. One physician finally muttered, "We don't know why you're still here." He smiled and replied, "Because I chose to be." And that was the truth. He didn't just endure the battle. He chose it. He owned it. He made it his. The disease came to break him. Instead, it built him into something unshakable. As he once scrawled in his notebook, "You don't choose the enemy, but you choose the fight. And that choice is everything." Part 3, the final stage. The night before everything ended, the world expected him to be silent. Weak. Gone. They expected a whisper, not a roar. But he was never one to surrender to expectation. Instead, he asked for something no one anticipated, a microphone, a real microphone. His request startled the doctors, confused the nurses, and left his family speechless. "Are you sure?" a nurse asked, her hand hovering over the wheelchair handles. He nodded. His lips cracked into a smile that carried more defiance than a clenched fist. "If this is my curtain call," he said, "then let the whole world hear me." They wheeled him into a small auditorium tucked inside the hospital. Rows of folding chairs filled the room. Strangers, patients, caregivers, tired workers on break, slipped into the seats out of curiosity. Some came expecting a farewell. Others came simply because they didn't want to miss whatever this man, this fighter, had to say. His body was frail, bones pressed against pale skin, hands trembling against the armrests. But his spirit, untouchable, it filled the room before he even spoke. The microphone buzzed when it was placed in his hand, as if the electricity itself recognized who it belonged to. He cleared his throat, leaned forward, and began to speak. His voice wasn't booming. It was raw, jagged, scarred. Yet every word shook the room like thunder crawling through stone. "Fear," he said, pausing to let the silence lean in, "is nothing but a liar. It tells you that tomorrow is promised. It tells you that you're not enough. It tells you to sit down, shut up, and disappear. But listen to me. Fear doesn't own you, unless you let it." The audience stilled. People shifted forward, elbows on knees, eyes wide. He had them already. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at the crowd. "Excuses are chains. Every time you say, 'I can't,' you wrap another chain around yourself. And let me tell you this, chains don't just hold you back, they choke you. Break them. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect time. Break them now." His chest heaved, but he smiled through the ache. Sweat dotted his forehead, his pulse raced, but the fire in his voice burned hotter than the weakness in his body. One woman in the back row began to cry quietly. A young man in the front gripped his notebook, scribbling every line as if his life depended on it. Even the nurses stood frozen by the door, forgetting their duties for a moment. "It doesn't matter how long you live," he continued, his voice gaining weight. "What matters is how much life you pour into your days. Stop waiting for more time. Start filling the time you have." He paused, looked around the room, locked eyes with faces that had expected a man's goodbye, but were instead witnessing a man's rebirth. Then he leaned closer to the microphone, his voice lowering, sharper. "I want you to remember this. Your last chapter can still be your best chapter. Don't you dare close the book early. Don't you dare." The words struck like a hammer. Some clapped their hands against their knees. Others shook their heads, as if waking from a spell. He shifted in the chair, gripping the microphone tighter. I spent too many nights thinking pain was punishment. But pain is not punishment. It's proof. Proof that you're still alive. Proof that you still have something to fight for. Pain doesn't end you. Surrender does. His breath caught, but he forced it steady. His voice cracked, yet it rang louder than before. You think weakness is a curse? He asked, scanning the room. You're wrong. Weakness is the soil where courage grows. I stand here weaker than I've ever been, and yet I've never been stronger. Why? Because courage was never about the body. It was always about the heart. A murmur of agreement rippled through the seats. Some nodded fiercely, others wiped at tears. He lifted his chin, letting the weight of his truth land heavy. Don't measure your life by what you lost. Measure it by what you gave. Don't measure your worth by what you can lift. Measure it by what you refuse to put down. The silence that followed was electric. You could hear the faint hum of the lights above, the creak of the building, the ragged breaths of those holding back emotion. Finally, he chuckled. It was low, broken, but it carried humor, the kind that comes from someone who still knows how to fight. You all thought I'd be quiet tonight, didn't you? That I'd fade out gently. No, not me. I'll tell you something. When the world expects your silence, that's the moment to speak louder. He coughed, the microphone catching the rasp, but no one looked away. They leaned closer. Every cough, every pause, only made them believe him more. Listen carefully, he said, voice softening into something almost intimate. One day, you'll face your own midnight hour. And when you do, I want you to remember what I said here. Don't waste it crying. Don't waste it wishing. Use it. Pour out everything you have left, because that is how you win. He raised a shaking finger to the ceiling. Life is still a gift, even when it's almost gone. Especially when it's almost gone. The room was silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a single breath out of rhythm. He wasn't just speaking anymore. He was transferring his fire into them. Every sentence was a torch passed. Every truth was a seed planted. He ended with a whisper that carried like a roar. Don't die with your music still inside you. Sing it now. Shout it now. Live it now. And when the microphone finally slipped from his trembling hand, the entire auditorium erupted. Not into applause, but into something deeper. People stood, hands over hearts, eyes burning, not clapping for him, but promising themselves something. Promising they'd carry his fire into their own battles. That night, he hadn't given a speech. He had given a transfusion of courage. And in the quiet after, as they wheeled him back to his room, he leaned toward the nurse beside him and whispered, Now they know. Now they'll never forget. Part 4. The breath that shook the world. Then came the moment. The moment no one wanted, but everyone knew was inevitable. The air in the room shifted, thicker, heavier, as if the universe itself leaned closer to listen. He knew his time was almost up. His body screamed, trembling with exhaustion, but his spirit, it refused to kneel. His voice cracked, his chest heaved, and the veins in his neck pulsed like the last drumbeat of war. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and summoned everything left inside him. Every scar, every fight, every memory, every ounce of stubborn courage. And then, with one final, earth-splitting breath, he shouted into the microphone. Live, Lives so hard that even death is scared to take you. The words ripped through the room like lightning. The microphone hissed from the force. For one heartbeat, there was nothing. No clapping, no breathing, no movement. Only silence. But it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of 1,000 souls being struck awake, their hearts catching fire all at once. And then, eruption. The audience broke into sobs, into applause, into shouts that rattled the walls. The sound wasn't polished like a performance. It was raw, chaotic, unstoppable, like an earthquake breaking loose from the ground. Nurses cried openly. Doctors who had spent years building a wall of clinical detachment felt it crumble in seconds. Strangers embraced each other, their tears mixing with laughter, their applause mixing with primal screams. That silence had turned into a storm. In that moment, he didn't die. He became immortal. His body sagged into the chair, his eyes fluttering closed, but his words kept echoing, bouncing inside every chest in the room. People weren't just hearing him, they were carrying him. He had transferred his breath into theirs. One young boy in the second row clutched his father's arm and whispered, "Did you hear that, Dad? We have to live like that." The father, once stoic, hardened by years, nodded, tears sliding down his face as if they had been waiting for this exact permission to fall. A woman battling her own illness sat straighter than she had in months. Her lips moved silently, repeating his last words like a sacred prayer. Live so hard. Live so hard. In the back, a nurse leaned against the wall, shaking her head. "I came here expecting to watch a man fade away," she muttered, voice trembling, "but I just watched him ignite an army." The applause grew, rolling like thunder, refusing to stop. People stood, clapping until their palms stung, some stamping their feet, others raising their fists high, as if they were soldiers answering a call to arms. And through it all, his body was still, fragile, quiet, yet his presence towered higher than ever. Because the truth was clear, immortality wasn't about avoiding death. It was about leaving behind something too powerful to erase. He had done exactly that. The auditorium became holy ground, not because of religion, not because of ritual, but because a man had dared to burn his last flame so brightly that it lit hundreds of others. "Do you feel that?" someone whispered. "Yes," another replied. "It's like he's still here." And he was. His words were etched in the marrow of every person present. He hadn't just spoken to them, he had branded them. The fire he carried now lived inside them, impossible to extinguish. Later that night, as the crowd spilled out into the cold air, people walked differently. Shoulders higher, eyes sharper. Some called loved ones they hadn't spoken to in years. Others tore up resignation letters they had been planning to send. A few decided that tomorrow would not be another wasted day. It would be the beginning of a fight, their fight. One man shouted into the night sky, "I will live louder than my fear," and strangers around him cheered in agreement. It was chaos, but it was holy chaos, the kind that changes people permanently. Back inside, a doctor whispered to a colleague, "We've kept thousands alive with machines, surgeries, drugs. But tonight, he kept hundreds alive with words." And the colleague nodded. This is why immortality doesn't live in the body. It lives in impact. Somewhere, as his chest slowed and his breath softened, he knew he had won. His eyes didn't open, but his lips curled into the faintest smile, as if he'd overheard the shift in the world outside. He had wanted his last breath to be his loudest, and it was immortality, he had once written in his journal, is not about never dying. It's about refusing to be forgotten. And he wasn't. In the days that followed, those who had been in that room told and retold the story. Videos spread across phones, across cities, across continents. Strangers who had never heard his name watched the clip of a man shouting his final command to the world. Live so hard that even death is scared to take you. It went viral. Not because of algorithms, but because truth spreads like wildfire. His words crossed languages, religions, and borders. Soldiers listened before battle. Teachers played it in classrooms. Parents whispered it to their children at bedtime. Patients clutched it like medicine stronger than any prescription. And though his chair in the auditorium sat empty, his presence remained everywhere. His voice lived in echoes and decisions, in the shaking off of excuses. In that silence after his last breath, the world had been rewritten, because one man, with nothing left to lose, had chosen to give everything. He hadn't died. He had detonated. He had become a legend. Part 5. The legend lives on. Days later, the video of his final speech began to circulate. At first, it was shared by those who had been there that night. Nurses who had recorded shaky clips on their phones, students who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed, strangers who walked out of the auditorium knowing they had seen history in its rawest form. They uploaded it quietly, almost reverently, never expecting what would come next. And then it exploded. Within hours, thousands were watching. By the second day, millions. Screens lit up across living rooms, offices, classrooms, hospital wards, and late-night buses. People sat hunched over glowing phones, tears sliding down their cheeks as they listened to his cracked, thunderous voice declaring, "Live. Live so hard that even death is scared to take you." The comment sections filled with confessions, vows, and stories. A soldier wrote, "I was ready to give up. His words just gave me another reason to fight." A young mother typed, "I was drowning in fear. Now I'll live louder for my children." A teenager added, "I was planning to end my life tonight. This video saved me." His face, pale, fragile, yet burning with defiance, became a symbol. His words became a war cry. Memes, posters, wallpapers, murals. Everywhere his final breath lived again in color and sound. Streets and cities far away were spray-painted with his quote. Teachers opened classes by playing his speech. Priests and imams and monks worked it into sermons. Radio hosts paused their playlists just to air his final words. The world hadn't just heard him. They had been moved by him. One journalist wrote in a national paper, "He spoke for less than an hour, but his voice reached across borders." In a time when most people scroll past everything, the world stopped to listen to a dying man remind us how to live. And somewhere in the great unknown, wherever spirits go when bodies finally rest, maybe he was smiling, because his last breath had done more than keep him alive. It had made him eternal. Airports echoed with his words as travelers listened through headphones. Gyms blasted his speech between sets. Protesters carried banners inked with his lines, chanting them through megaphones. A nurse in Brazil tattooed, Your last chapter can still be your best chapter on a wrist. A boxer in the Philippines taped "Break the Chains" onto his gloves before entering the ring. Everywhere he was there. And yet, what spread wasn't just his words, it was his defiance, his courage, his refusal to go quietly. People weren't just quoting him, they were imitating him. They were sitting up straighter in hospital beds. They were calling old friends. They were facing their fears not tomorrow, but today. A father told his son at dinner, "Legends are not measured by how they die, but by how they choose to live." And the boy repeated it softly, as if memorizing scripture. The ripple became a wave, and the wave became a movement. Across social media, people started using a single phrase, #LiveSoHard. It wasn't just a trend, it was a revolution of spirit. And the beauty was this: no one knew his full story. No biography had been written, no documentary had yet aired. But they didn't need the details. They needed the fire. And the fire had already spread too far to ever be put out. A filmmaker later said in an interview, "Most heroes are given a stage. He created his stage from a hospital bed. That's what made him unstoppable." Some skeptics tried to dismiss it. They called it a viral fad, a moment of sentiment. But they underestimated the depth of what had happened. Because a fad fades, a sentiment softens. But when a man uses his final breath to light torches in 1,000 hearts, it doesn't fade, it multiplies. And multiply it did. A group of cancer patients in Chicago gathered every Thursday night to play his video and share their own declarations of defiance. A high school in Tokyo painted his words across their gym wall. "Don't die with your music still inside you." A young woman in South Africa, standing at the edge of despair, wrote his quote on her mirror and said it to herself every morning until her tears turned into strength. The world had crowned him without ceremony. He was no longer just a man. He was a legend. Somewhere, his sister scrolled through the endless flood of videos, posts, articles, and comments. She wept, not because she missed him, though she did, but because she realized he was still here. In every share, in every whispered vow, in every person who shouted his words into their own battles. "Maybe immortality looks like this," she said softly, her fingers brushing the glowing screen. And maybe she was right, because legends don't rest in graves. They live in motion, in memory, in every choice we make to fight harder, to breathe deeper, to live louder. The truth had become undeniable. His last chapter wasn't just his best chapter. It had become the first chapter of countless others. As one poet later wrote, "He died once, but he lives 1,000 times a day in us." And somewhere in the great unknown, if there's a place where souls can see the echoes they leave behind, maybe he was smiling wide, watching a planet roar with life because he refused to whisper in his final hour. Because in the end, he had proven something no one could ever erase. Legends are not measured by how they die, but by how they choose to live. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.